It's Sunday, it's the afternoon, and it's another week of NFL football. It's time for the Wiseguy Show. It's the Wiseguy Show. I I am not a wise guy, but for all intents and purposes on YouTube, I am for the moment. I am your host, Albert Lanier, and this, of course, is the Wiseguy Show. Week 9 of the NFL, and some surprises. There were some really close games in week 9. So, week 9 is the midway point of the NFL season. It's the halfway mark of NFL 2025. And it was quite a halfway mark. There were some real surprises in week 9. Real surprises in week 9. So let's take a look at some of the games of week 9 in the NFL. Right here on the Wiseguy Show. So let's start off with a game that probably wouldn't surprise too many people. It's a Thursday night game. It was the Ravens-Dolphins. I don't think that anyone was surprised with Lamar Jackson back that the Ravens would win this game, which they did, and rather win confidently. I still think they have an uphill battle. I think it's ridiculous to say that the Ravens have the potential to be a playoff team, even with Lamar Jackson back, at least for the moment. They did a good job in this game. I think more important to them with the Ravens, they're not the defensive team that they were, though they played fairly well defensively. I think when you look at the Ravens, they're going to have to be good offensively. You know, they can score points. They did it a couple times earlier this season, especially up against the Bills in a game they lost. But a good job here with the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are a team that I wouldn't say they're up and down. They can play well, and they played well at times this year. But generally speaking, there's a malaise. There's a malaise impacting this team. I mean, they've got some real issues there. I mean, read into Tua Tagovailoa's, complain about the player meeting all you want. There's some real issues with this team. Have they checked out for the season, started, thinking about, vacation, Cancun or Acapulco or what have you? I don't know. Next up, probably one of the surprises of the week is Steelers-Colts or Colts-Steelers. And the Colts really got manhandled. They made this a close game, but the Colts really got manhandled in this game. And I had said this on my NFL, on my NFL hot topic segment, which you can listen to on the Writer Report. You can find that at mixlr.com. That's mixlr.com. You can also see it at the Writer Report page on YouTube. So check it out on YouTube or at mixlr.com. So I had mentioned that for the Steelers to win against the Colts, a team that I've said is probably the closest to a complete team this year, the defense has to have a good game. Defense has got to get turnovers. They've got to get sacks. They've got to be aggressive. And that's precisely what the Steelers defense did. They got turnovers here. They knocked it, they had, I think, tipped balls or added balls and got turnovers. They got sacks. They got to Daniel Jones at least a couple of times. This was a dominant defensive showing for the Steelers. And offensively, at first, they faced, they weren't able to punch it in that, thanks to the Colts offense. Sorry, Colts defense. But the reality was the Steelers led with their defense and followed with the offense. And the offense was pretty good here. There are a couple of things. There was a fumble later on, which kind of gave the Colts a chance to at least try to think about coming back in this game, even though it was very late in the game, because all the Steelers needed was like a couple of first downs to win. But the Steelers were able to score. They were able to score confidently. They led largely throughout this game, which is a surprise when you look at the Colts. This was the kind of game that the Steelers had to have. They lost a close game to the Bengals. They led against the Packers last week, and then the Packers got red hot in the second half, and the defense just couldn't shut them down offensively. This Steelers defense was able to largely shut down the run of Jonathan Taylor. I think at one point he only had 24 yards on the ground. I think he had less than 100 in this game, certainly. He didn't have a big game. And they were able to contain Daniel Jones for the most part. This was a really good game. This is kind of a resume statement game, what I call a resume game. And the Steelers are demonstrating, they lost a couple of games, but they're still a good team. And they beat the best team in football. Now, what the Steelers need to do is they need to get a couple of more wins. They need to get some more wins. Because you have the Bengals, they're doing pretty well. And also the Ravens, I don't really see the Ravens, but they may win some games. So Steelers have to pick up some games. And that was a good game. I don't think it was as good as I thought. I thought it'd be a sort of closer game. But it was a good game, certainly. And like I said, this week, there were a number of surprise games, real surprises. I think the biggest surprise that I'd say of the week has to be Carolina Panthers beating the Packers at Lambeau. I just thought that was a game. And again, the thing about the Panthers this year is sometimes they can play very well. I mean, it helped that they had Bryce Young back. Sometimes they can play fairly well and make a comeback and play up to snuff. And other times they can't. This was the kind of game that the Packers seem not to be winning. They won a close game this year, but some of these close games, the Packers aren't winning. They didn't win a close one against Cleveland. Cleveland won at the end. And this was pretty much what happened with the Panthers. The Panthers were able to score at least a couple of touchdowns, and the Packers had to settle for field goals. The offense was off in this game to a certain extent with Green Bay. And one of the things I've said about the Packers this year is at the beginning, I think that the Packers defense was scary. I call them scary. I don't think they're scary anymore. I think they're good, but they're not scary. And I don't think if the Packers are able to move on, these are kind of weak points. Now, every team has its flaws, and every team has games that kind of lost and should have won. This was one of those games that the Packers should have won, but the Panthers played a really good game. I think, Dowdle ran fairly well in this game. Bryce Young was back in, so that was good for them. He was able to drive down the field. More importantly, I think the Panthers whether this was part of the game plan or not, they knew, I think with this Packers team, that you got to keep it close if you're going to have a chance to win. And you got to basically keep it down to the wire until the end and get a field goal or something so as to be able to pull out a win. And that's basically how you beat the Packers this year. You got to get them. You got to get them to a tie or something, or you got to get within a couple of points and then get to a field goal late in the fourth and get to field goal attempt late in the fourth and kick it for a win or loss, depending on how you execute. But that's basically how you're going to be able to. That's basically how you're going to be able to beat this. And again, this is part of what I call the weakness of the Packers. There's stuff about the Packers. This is a good team, but they're gonna. And I'll say this, and I'll say this again, probably. The Packers offense is really going to have to lead with this team. They're going to have to get points on the board. They're going to have to be able to win games. I don't think their defense is going to be able to do it. I think Micah Parsons has come in. He's gotten some sacks, but this isn't a team that can lead with their defense. And I thought they might be able to do that very early on in the season, but they weren't going to be able. But I don't think they're going to be able to do that. The Panthers played a good, solid game here. I think they look pretty good defensively, even though they're not a great team. It's really going to be, when it comes down at the end of the day, I think with the Panthers, it's hard to see where they're going to go. I said, I think elsewhere, that they were a seesaw team. And here's another surprise. That was probably the surprise of the day, or one of the surprises of the day. There were other surprises. Vikings beating the Lions. And I think that was a surprise, but it was, I think, less of a surprise compared to the Panthers Packers, because it's more of a divisional heads up. JJ McCarthy came back. You look at this Vikings team, and it's hard to believe that this is a team that got demolished by the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, this team was aggressive on defense. Their offense was able to score points. It was a fairly close game initially. I think what killed the Lions here was the sacks. I mean, they had sacks on third down, and that was like drive killers in this game. And I think that's a huge difference. I think the Lions, they're going to have to look a little at protection here. Now, honestly, I think they're going to have to look at protection. You can't allow too many games like that where Goff is getting sacked in third down. On third down, it's not going to work. This Viking team looked very different. It's hard to say what's going to happen. JJ McCarthy's got to stay healthy. You had the first game and he was injured in the second game. It's hard to say much about McCarthy other than he had a good effort in his first game coming back against the Bears. He had a good effort here. You need a couple more games, something, I don't know if he'll play the rest of the season, but he'll need something else to go and talk, to say much about him and where he can go. But this was one of the big surprises of the day, the Vikings beating the Lions. I will say, I think another surprise is how well the Falcons played against the Patriots. The Patriots barely won that game. That was a big surprise. I think the Falcons looked pretty good and played well in that game too. I think that and another one was the Chargers and the Texans. That's another one. Now, granted, I wasn't really surprised the Texans played better in this game, played fairly well in this game. But this is a victory they eked out. CJ Stroud was out. So CJ Stroud's out. If he's out for the rest of the season, I mean, the Texans didn't look like they were going to be a playoff team anyway, but they're in trouble if he's out. I mean, they were already in trouble. They're not doing well, even with him as quarterback. But I think they're toasted. This guy is out for longer than a week or two. But the Chargers barely got by in that game. Oh, sorry. That wasn't Texans. I got it mixed up. Broncos, Texans. Sorry about that, folks. The Broncos barely got by the Texans. And of course, CJ Stroud was injured in that game. The Broncos defense got some sacks, but that team had to basically pull it out in the fourth. And that's a team that you don't want to play close until the fourth. You don't want to do that with Denver. Denver barely won that game, but they did it to keep pace in the West. Chargers, Titans, that's another game. Chargers barely got by the Titans. A big surprise. Titans actually played fairly well in that game, but still offensively, they're kind of a work in progress. Well, the whole, Cam Ward is a work in progress, but that offense is a work in progress because they got their points off a pick six and then a run back. So the offense really wasn't putting up the points in that board. I think the Titans were fortunate that they got special teams touchdown and they got a defensive touchdown. But the Chargers got by that game. That's probably one of the best games of the year for the Titans thus far. That and the Cardinals game that they won. But this was actually a pretty good game by the Titans. They actually played fairly well here. Finally, Bears, Bengals. This was the game of the week. I know everybody's looking at KC Bills, but thus far, game of the week, Bears, Bengals. This went down to the wire. Again, this was a superb game. And I knew that the Bears, I knew it was going to be hard for the Bengals. And I said this before. The problem with the Bengals is their defense just cannot stop teams. Cannot stop them. Their offense is giving them a chance to win. It's not enough, right? Flacco had a pretty good game here. But the reality was the Bears, especially near the end, with the run for the touchdown at the end, they gave them 45. I think was it 40? Yeah, it was. Over 45, I should say. You can't allow something like that to happen. I mean, you're supposed to wrap that guy up. You're supposed to wrap that guy up, but he goes and runs for it. I actually think, although, they got the touchdown, which was good for the Bears, it also gave the Bengals some time on the clock. I think it was over a minute that they gave them on the clock. But, yeah, I look at, again, the Bengals, this team just can't win the games they need to. And the Bears are a good team. And they're going to put up points. And they did. They put up over 40 points here. The Bengals put up points too. But it's the same thing with the Jets. This Bengals team just can't, it doesn't have what it takes. Even with Joe Burrow, this team doesn't do it. This team needs to invest in a defense. I said it with Dallas. Dallas defense isn't winning. Neither is the Bengals. And the Bengals still technically have a shot at a winning season here. But they're losing games. They should have beat the Jets last week. They didn't do that. They had a chance to beat the Bears, and they couldn't do that. At least not prevent them from winning the game. It's just, you look at moves like that. Caleb Williams had, I think, one of his best games that I've seen him played this year. He actually received in this game. He got a touchdown, and he had a reception. So he had a couple receptions, which is kind of unusual for a quarterback. But I think that was the game of the week. And with that, the week is up right here on the Wiseguy Show. As always, I'm the host, Albert Lanier, allowing this audience to get wise as to what's happening in the NFL right here on YouTube. Bye-bye, folks.